So again, all these things are tied together, but high insulin causes inflammation, and this can raise prostaglandins, which is a pain signaling chemical involved in cramps. It can increase uterine muscle sensitivity to those prostaglandins, and this can also, higher insulin can create more androgens, which can lead to more painful cycles. Hello, welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe and confident transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. I just got a haircut this afternoon, and so of course I had to come on the podcast. Well, my hair is looking good. I decided to chop about 2 inches off, and I have really thick, heavy hair, which I'm very grateful for. I would much rather it be that way than, really thin hair, which interestingly enough, my mom has super thin hair. Like, she's always had to use specific shampoo to help bolster her hair growth and thickness, I guess. And my dad has a really thick hair. So thankfully, both me and my sister got his hair and have really thick hair, and we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. But regardless, I got 2 inches cut off. And for those of you with long to short hair, you just feel so much lighter. And I went darker the last time I saw my hairdresser. So I'm just really embracing the short, darker bob look today, or until it grows out. So we'll see how long this is. I tend to go in phases. Anyways, we are going to be talking about painful periods, all things painful periods, and the root causes of period pain. And I'm also going to touch on endometriosis because, I see women a lot who, that word endometriosis of you might have endometriosis, but then they go and get it tested and it doesn't show up. And there's just a lot of confusion of do I have endometriosis? I have all the symptoms of endometriosis, but I'm not getting diagnosed with it. And first of all, you have to have a very specific test to diagnose endometriosis to really identify if the endometrial tissue is growing outside of where it should be. And a lot of times doctors don't do that specific test, or it's just assumed, or unfortunately, a lot of women, they've been gaslit into thinking oh, it's not that bad. It's just part of being a woman. All things that are not supportive for women's health and well-being. So we're going to be touching on endometriosis a bit, but overall this podcast episode, I really want to do an episode about the root causes of painful periods. And of course, I'm going to be coming from the lens of, how so many women are put on birth control to quote unquote fix their period problems, even with endometriosis, but that's not actually getting to the root cause. So I first want to normalize that painful periods are not normal. They're common, but they're not normal. And if you've been told your only options are to go on birth control, get an ablation or a hysterectomy, literally get an organ removed, or your labs are normal, but you're still suffering with debilitating cramps, sometimes throwing up, back pain, that's not normal, and you deserve better. There are plenty of root causes that get left unturned. I think I'm saying that wrong. There are plenty of stones that are left unturned of root causes of painful periods, and unfortunately, most doctors aren't trained to recognize, or they don't run or aren't knowledgeable on the test to really identify those. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The other thing I want to say is that painful periods are not just a hormone imbalance. I talk about this a lot with so many other things, like with acne, with moods, etc. It's not just a hormone thing, okay? Yes, hormones can play a role. We'll dive into that piece. But we have to be looking deeper of with the iceberg of hormone imbalance. What is driving that hormone imbalance? Is it gut stuff? Is it mineral deficiencies? Is it inflammation? Is it stress? All of those things are what's actually under the hormone balance. So that's why just going on birth control isn't going to fix the root cause of your painful periods. And for the women that I work with, so many of them come to me and they were like, I was put on birth control when I was 12, when I was 13, when I was 14 for really painful periods, and I want to come off. Maybe they want to have a baby, maybe they, just want to get off artificial hormones, or maybe they're still dealing with painful periods or other symptoms that birth control isn't fixing, or they might have symptoms from the birth control, like their anxiety might have gotten worse. They are more bloated. It's making their skin break out. and they want to get off, but they're terrified of that period pain coming back. So if that is you, this is the perfect episode. I'm so glad you're here, and I really hope that you leave this with education and resources and a clear plan of how to uncover what your root causes are that are causing your period pain, as well as what to do with that. So root causes, let's just go ahead and dive right in. The first one is inflammation and stress. One part of this is iron overload and high copper. So iron overload, and all these things are true for endometriosis too. So as I'm talking about these root causes, this all pertains to endometriosis as well. Specifically, there are studies linking iron overload to endometriosis. And actually, the client who we are experiencing this right now, we identified in her labs that her iron was really, really high. And iron is a metal, and if you have too much of it, it's a mineral, but if you have too much of it, it causes inflammation. Same thing with copper. And so we always want to be thinking, why is this overloaded? And there can be a variety of reasons for this. So some clients with the iron overload, they have to get that out of their system. And again, there are studies showing that blood donation is super, super helpful for those who have true iron overload. You want to make sure you're working with a provider who's trained in knowing what a functional iron overload panel looks like, because I will tell you, sometimes conventional ranges do not flag what I would consider iron overload, and same with copper. They do not consider, their copper to be high. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But either one of these being high is causing inflammation in your body. And so we need to, if someone has high copper, I take them through a root cause copper detox with certain other minerals and binders to get rid of that copper from their body. This is with iron overload. This could be supporting iron recycling with certain vitamins, minerals like A and C, and copper actually helps with iron recycling too. So this is where you have to look at all of those pieces of the puzzle. And some people, they need a donation with the iron overload. This is interesting because with certain birth control pills, those placebo pills, those sugar pills that you take to induce that artificial period, some of those pills contain iron. And so as I'm working with women to help them safely transition off birth control, I usually recommend, if possible, prepping for 3 to 4 months prior to coming off so that they have a smoother transition. So sometimes if I ID iron overload, but we're not ready to completely stop birth control yet, I'll have them just skip those sugar pills. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying everyone needs to be doing that, but I will tell them that has some iron. So if you're already overloaded in iron, we want to reduce that artificial iron in your body as much as possible. This does not usually correlate to reducing red meat or spinach or foods high in iron or copper, but it is more of those, again, artificial sources. If you're taking a multivitamin, if you're taking an iron supplement, for example, those are things that we need to be looking at and reducing or eliminating those things. So inflammation and stress in the body could be from high copper, iron overload, toxic metals. It could also be from stress. It could be your mineral burn rate is really, really high. So for example, magnesium is really helpful for decreasing muscle contractions and muscle tension. And if you are stressed, magnesium is the first mineral that you burn through. And so I've seen plenty of women who their minerals are depleted, including, certain minerals that are supportive for not just hormone balance, but also the overall painful period picture in terms of muscle contractions, because your uterus is a muscle, and the cramping is muscle contractions, right? And so this can be a root cause that, if we're just looking at blood labs, we'll often miss. That's why I run the hair tissue mineral analysis, because it gives us a much bigger picture over 3 months of not just your mineral levels, but how minerals are reacting to each other because they're synergistic. The other stressor could be under-eating. So similar, I see a lot of women under-eating, whether it's intentional or unintentional. We live in a society that really encourages disordered eating and elimination of certain foods like carbs and fat, or just really being strict on not eating too many calories, right? This could also be exercise. So even if you're eating an adequate amount, you might not be eating an adequate amount for your level of activity. I've seen this in people who are very active. or, their hobbies revolve around being active or sports. It could also be from low progesterone. All of these things tie together, right? So if you're under eating, your progesterone is probably low or, non-existent. And that can lead to, which we'll get to here in a bit, but that can lead to an estrogen dominance, which is essentially when your estrogen isn't too high, it's within optimal range. But if it's too high compared to progesterone, it can manifest in your body as symptoms of estrogen dominance, which can translate into painful periods. The other thing too with under eating and just erratic eating is insulin resistance or high fasting insulin. I actually just had this with I had this conversation with a client of mine who was actually on the podcast several episodes ago talking about how we help get to the root of her painful periods. And she, for the first time in her life, is having, symptom-free periods. She, after, several months of having great symptom-free periods, started getting some period pain again. So instead of freaking out, we were like, okay, what is your body trying to tell us? So we ran some updated labs. And right away, her insulin was sky high. And so we now know, we have that data. We think, okay, why is this happening? She got a new job. It's a great job, but she's, more stressed. She's a manager. And she also is going from someone who has a history of disordered eating, as well as just unintentionally underfueling herself. And I have seen that with women where they go from a malnourished place, and once they start fueling themselves appropriately, their body almost has this like swing and their insulin can go high. And that doesn't mean that them eating more was a bad thing. It just means that their body doesn't know how to deal with that and combined with the stress, low minerals like magnesium burn through rate, that's really important for blood sugar regulation. So again, all these things are tied together, but high insulin causes inflammation, and this can raise prostaglandins, which is a pain signaling chemical involved in cramps. It can increase uterine muscle sensitivity to those prostaglandins, and this can also higher insulin can create more androgens, which can lead to more painful cycles. This is something that also with things like PCOS is a root cause of that. If you maybe have erratic periods or not consistent periods, or they tend to be more painful when they do happen. So the first root cause is inflammation and stress in the body, and that can be from toxic metals. It can be from insulin resistance, under eating, and low hormones, low minerals as a result. The next category of root causes is vitamin and mineral depletion. So I already touched on this a little bit, but just as a review of some other vitamins and minerals you want to pay attention to, any antioxidants, so vitamin E, vitamin A, vitamin C, those are going to be minerals that your body needs more of because they help combat inflammation, which was the category 1. Iodine is also an amazing mineral for period pain or for PMS symptoms. Iodine has a really interesting relationship with copper and with estrogen. So when we talked about in category 1, inflammation, a lot of times painful period can be a root cause, could be high copper. I'm going to go even deeper here with birth control. I see a lot of copper elevated from being on birth control for so long because it has certain types of birth control have artificial estrogen. Estrogen and copper have a synergistic relationship, so they both rise together. So if you're taking birth control with estrogen in it, which does not work the same way as natural estrogen, FYI, same with progesterone, then it's going to, for some people, it can raise your copper. Estrogen and copper have a synergistic relationship. They rise and fall together. Iodine has an antagonistic relationship. I think that's the right word. It does the opposite. So if your estrogen and copper raise, your iodine lowers. And iodine is super important for helping with period pain. It's also important for detoxification. So we'll talk about poor detoxification and estrogen overload here in a bit. But as a preview, if your liver is overloaded, which if you've been on birth control for a period of time, your liver is going to be sluggish because it has to, like with any medication or toxin or whatever, it has to rid the body of that. So that is something with iodine. It helps with detoxification. It also helps with thyroid health and metabolic health as well. So all of these things with iodine help with one, lowering your copper and estrogen, but also helping prevent painful periods because it helps with overall lowering inflammation and helping support detoxification in the body, amongst many, many other functions. So I have not used this in my practice, but I've had my mentor talked about with certain women, she would actually have women apply iodine topically to their breasts if they were having breast tenderness during like the luteal phase. And that even was really, really helpful for them because of its mechanisms. The next category is gut health. So this kind of lumps into the stressors on the body as well. But I wanted to parse this out because a lot of times we don't think about gut health in relation to periods, right? Like we think about it in terms of maybe our skin, but we don't think about it in terms of painful periods. But there's a really clear connection because this is a huge builder of hormones. So if you have poor digestion, this is going to lead to higher inflammation, or what's commonly known as leaky gut. So if the tight junctions of your intestinal lining are not tight, it's going to let undigested food particles, certain toxins, intoxicants go through that intestinal lining because there's openings there and into the bloodstream, which is going to cause inflammation. You also might not be, if you have low stomach acid from stress, from, it might be overgrowth of H. pylori or something like that, then that will make it more difficult. You're not going to be absorbing and getting in or taking in the minerals and certain vitamins that you're consuming. So like B vitamins, which are also really important for, they're important for a lot of things, but they do play a role, for example, B6 in painful periods if we're too low in that. So another category with this is poor estrogen detoxification. So there is a group of bacteria in the gut, the estrobolome, which essentially packages estrogen up to be detoxed from the body. So part of our detox pathways, we think a lot about the liver, but it's also pooping. So if you're not pooping every single day and you're having painful periods, I guarantee you there's a connection there because it's one of your main detox systems. So with the stool test that I run, the GI map, it shows how high is your beta glucuronidase, which is part of the estrobolome bacteria. And if it's high, it means that you're not detoxifying estrogen from the gut. This can happen if you have, daily bowel movements or not. It's the estrogen is recirculating in your body. So that's creating estrogen dominance, which can lead to painful periods. Similarly, if you have any overgrowth of bad bacteria, this can create inflammation in the gut, and this is going to be a stressor on your body. Another thing I want to note here is that this plays a role with the iron picture as well. So when I see iron overload in the body, I think that's interesting, and then I look at the gut and I'm like, oh, we have candida. Candida feeds and certain other bacteria feed off of iron. So if someone has high like ferritin, that signals inflammation, there might be some gut stuff going on, or maybe there's a parasite. Or if someone was diagnosed with anemia, they might be diagnosed with anemia and they might be taking iron supplements, but that's actually not correcting the anemia. It's feeding the gut pathogen that is feeding off of the iron. And so this is where we have to look at the body as a whole system, and all these things play into each other. The body doesn't just, the gut doesn't work in isolation. It works with your minerals, it works with your stress, it works with all these systems. And that's why I always really focus on, I don't test hormones very often because I don't need to. When I have all this other data, that's more important and more efficient at getting my clients better results. The last category is estrogen imbalance or poor detox. So as I mentioned earlier, this could be low progesterone in relation to estrogen. So if someone is under eating, for example, and they have low estrogen, they might also have if they have low progesterone, they might also have low estrogen, or they might just have low progesterone in relation to estrogen. They might also have true estrogen dominance where they have too much estrogen. So this is where we have to look at, why is that happening? Why do you have estrogen dominance? Is that from your body, your detox pathways are sluggish? Like, what's going on here? It could also be, being on birth control and that being estrogen overload. Like I said, if you're on artificial estrogen and your body can't detoxify it, that could be a key player too, which is ironic because so many women are put on birth control to help with painful periods. But this is a really good example of how this and the iron and the copper overload, I think, are good examples of how that is working against them. And it might work for a short period of time, but it's not a root cause solution. And it's making things worse. It's adding fuel to the fire behind the scenes, unfortunately. But women don't know that. Doctors, probably don't even know that. And this is why we're stuck in this vicious cycle of like, we'll just go back on birth control. Okay, it helps for a little bit, but it's not a root cause solution. I want to get off and have a family. We don't really know what to do with it. So that's my goal, is to help women identify these things and get to the root cause. Okay, I digress. That's a tangent. And then low iodine, as we discussed, this can be a huge thing of estrogen imbalance, high copper, if someone's iodine is low. So I test iodine through a urine iodine loading test in my VIP coaching program, because this is not only important for periods, it's also really important for energy. It's important for detoxification, your thyroid, metabolic health, and skin as well. Really huge with acne. So as an overview, our 4 big root causes, a big overview: inflammation, vitamin mineral depletion, especially antioxidants, gut health, poor gut health, dysbiosis, and estrogen imbalance and poor detoxification. So a quick note on endometriosis. I want to first, if you don't know what endometriosis is, it's a chronic inflammatory condition where the endometrial tissue, similar to the uterine lining, grows outside the uterus. So like on the ovaries, it can go to the bowels, it can go to the bladder, it can grow where it's not supposed to grow. And this can cause severe pelvic pain, pain with sex or bowel movements, heavy bleeding, infertility, and really, really painful periods, or even pain outside of your periods. It's often missed because labs and ultrasounds can appear normal. And so the only definitive diagnosis is laparoscopy. So you have to get a surgery with a biopsy for this. So it's not an easy let's just survey the area or let's do a physical exam. It's like, no, you have to go in there to see if the tissue has spread and if it's true endometriosis. Just like with the root causes we talked about above, all of those things apply to endometriosis, okay? Inflammation, immune dysregulation is a big one too here. Hormone signaling, depleted minerals. So with the client I was talking about earlier, a few of her big root cause drivers were she had really depleted gut bacteria. That was one thing I forgot to mention with the gut. I focused on overgrowth, but if you have low levels of good bacteria, this creates dysbiosis in the gut, an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. So her good bacteria levels were wiped out. She had certain vitamins and minerals we needed to focus on for her. She was lower in those. She also had iron overload, which was causing an inflammatory response in her body. And she also had some sluggish liver detoxification. So all of those things play a role in endometriosis. So it's one of those things that it's not just it is a chronic condition. You don't just get rid of endometriosis. You have to manage it. But I would also argue that's the same for everything. Like that's the same for painful periods. That's how your body communicates. It's the same with acne. You're always going to be acne prone. Like you just have to learn how to manage it with your root causes and knowing exactly what plan you need. So, these things aren't a cure for endometriosis, but it will significantly reduce the pain and improve quality of life if you identify what those root causes are through targeted functional lab work and a customized, personalized plan. Okay, so action steps. I don't want to just leave you with okay, here are all your root causes. What do you do? Of course, functional testing is my ultimate goal, working with a professional to identify what your unique root causes are. And if you want some actionable tips that you can incorporate that are, going to be helpful no matter what, I would say focusing on anti-inflammatory foods. I am not a fan of restricting any food, so I do not recommend eliminating dairy or gluten or sugar unless you are, allergic to something. But those really aren't the big issues. It's more of what's the environment in the gut the food is landing in? What are other inflammatory pathways that are the true problem? And those foods might just be causing more or might be adding more fuel to the fire. So I never recommend restricting a particular food unless we've done the testing and we determine that there is a true allergy or intolerance. So instead, you can incorporate anti-inflammatory food like ginger, turmeric. You could also do detox supportive foods to help detoxify estrogen. So this is going to be dandelion tea, beets, adequate protein, raw carrots that kind of like mop up that extra estrogen and detoxify it. Also, ground flaxseed and chia seeds are great here. Making sure you're eating enough is huge. So eating something within an hour of waking up every 2 to 4 hours throughout the day to balance blood sugar, making sure you're having a carb plus a protein and a fat at most meals and snacks. Castor oil packs. I'm going to link my favorite castor oil pack in the description or in the show notes below. I love castor oil packs because they're a really good non-food, non-supplement way to support your body, and they're very passive. You don't have to do much. So I like the Queen of Thrones brand because you put the castor oil, which is an anti-inflammatory oil, you put it around the right side of your body, which is where your liver is, and that permeates through your skin and helps stimulate lymphatic drainage, detoxification. So I just put mine on every other night, and I put my robe on because you want to make sure you have clothes that you're okay with oil getting on it and stuff like that. And then I just watch a show, and then I take it off, kind of if there's any excess oil, rub it into my skin and go to bed. Some people wear their castor oil pack overnight. I do not do that because I do not want to stain my sheets, but I have some clients who do that and they love it. So that's a really good way to help support detox. Just do not do that if you're breastfeeding or pregnant. Castor oil packs are not safe for that. And then mineral mocktails and targeted supplements based on your lab data, of course. So mineral mocktails are something that everyone can do. I'll link my free mineral mocktail guide below if you want to check that out for some easy recipes. And then just don't blindly supplement because you're going to be wasting so much money. This is where targeted testing can be so helpful in the long run. Yes, it's an investment up front, but it's going to save you so much time and money because you'll know exactly, you're not shooting in the dark anymore. You're going to know exactly what supplements and foods you need to focus on. So just in closing, really, I want you to walk away knowing that your painful periods are not just something you have to live with. If you have not gotten functional testing done, if you have not worked with an expert to identify what the root cause of your periods are, if you've just been told, it's just part of being a woman, your only option is to go on birth control or get an ablation, like we mentioned earlier, I want you to know that that is not the case. There are other options for you. You just need the right plan and the right support. So if this is something that you're interested in working together to figure out what your root causes are and get a targeted test and targeted plan based on what we uncover, feel free to schedule a call with me or follow me on Instagram. Also check out my free Breakup with Birth Control Masterclass just for a little bit of a sense of what my approach is even more, especially if you're new to the podcast. It'll be a great way to get a feel for the work that I do and how I help women just like you safely stop birth control without painful periods coming back. And this is something that if you know someone who's dealing with debilitating periods, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a family member or a close friend, send this episode to them. Pass this along because I can't tell you how many, I'm in Facebook groups and I just am talking to people in my life and how many women are struggling with this and they don't know that there are other options. And my goal is to get this information out there so more women can figure out and correct their period pain and live their life without it taking over, and without it basically being a fear that they have of that month coming up, or what if it's on vacation, or what if on my wedding I'm on my period, right? We shouldn't have to revolve our lives around our period. So please share this episode, like it, give it a 5-star review. If you haven't yet, I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay nourished.